Good morning. My name is Brandon, and I'm an alcoholic and addict in recovery. And the last couple days, I've been talking about the relapse phases as laid out by Gorski and Miller in their book, Staying Sober, a guide on relapse prevention. Today, I'm talking about phases 5 and 6. So, phase 5, at this point, we're already into the relapse process, although we haven't taken any drugs or alcohol yet. We're still sober. And so some of the symptoms they describe this phase as immobilization. The overall description is, during this phase, I feel trapped in an endless stream of unmanageable problems and feel like giving up. I can't seem to get started or make myself do the things that I know I need to do. So in this phase, there's several different traits that they talk about. One is daydreaming and wishful thinking. It becomes more difficult to concentrate or figure things out. I have fantasies of escaping or being rescued from it all. The if-only syndrome becomes more common in conversation. I start daydreaming and wishing for things that I want without doing anything to try to get them. Now, I haven't experienced that kind of feeling in recovery, but I sure did experience it quite a bit in my addiction. I used to have great dreams of either writing a novel that sold millions of copies and I wouldn't have to work for the rest of my life, or winning the lottery, and easily getting this windfall of cash that would allow me to just not ever have to work again, and I could just spend my days drinking, which would have been a disaster. So good thing that didn't happen. And I do find myself staying very far away from that kind of thinking in my recovery. I recognize in recovery that for the things I want in life, there's going to be work to do to get them. There's got to be planning to get them, and that there's very, very rarely, if ever, any kind of magical solution that's going to just pop up out of nowhere and save me. I've got to do work myself to make things happen. Then also in this phase, people have feelings that nothing can be solved. I begin to feel like a failure who will never be able to get anything right. I start to believe that I've tried my best and recovery isn't working out. So again, the feeling of being a failure, something I'm very familiar with from days in my addiction, something that I very rarely feel in recovery. Only in my darkest moments in recovery do I feel like there's something inherently wrong with me, that I can't succeed at something. And in those moments, I typically recognize that as old stinking thinking type of stuff. I'm typically able to recognize that, this isn't really true. This is just me getting in my self-pity and wallowing around a little bit. And I got to do something to get out of the funk. Go for a walk, meditate, pray, talk to a friend, go to a meeting, read the big book. There's a huge laundry list of stuff I can do to get out of those mental spaces when they do crop up. Another symptom here is an immature wish to be happy. They describe what the immature wish is as, I want to be happy, but I have no idea what I can do to make myself happy. I am not willing to work hard or pay the price for the happiness that I want. I start wishing that something magical would happen to rescue me from my problems. And this reminded me of, there's so many great stories in the world where that very thing happens, where something magical happens that rescues the protagonist from their problems. I'm reading one right now. It's a novel called The Magicians by Lev Grossman. And it's very much like the Harry Potter story, where something magical happens to pull the hero out of this place of desperation and depression and into this magical world. But if you look at those stories, the pattern of all of those stories is eventually the hero finds problems in that world that he or she thought was going to fix everything for them, And they come to find out that the only way to true happiness is from within and from doing work to be happy. And usually it involves friendships, community, helping others, the kinds of things that we learn about in these books. So anyway, that's the immature side of happiness, is just wishing for happiness without wishing for magical happiness to just come along and happen. And that's not typically the way it works. So that's phase 5. Phase 6 is where we start to experience confusion and overreaction. So by this point in the relapse process, emotions and cognition are starting to be affected. So we've got trouble thinking clearly and managing thoughts, feelings, and actions. I am irritable and tend to overreact to small things. So the first symptom, difficulty in thinking clearly. I start to have trouble thinking clearly and solving usually simple problems. My mind tends to wander. I have difficulty thinking about something for more than a few minutes. The second symptom, difficulty in managing feelings and emotions. So this is where I overreact emotionally and feel too much sometimes. At other times, I become emotionally numb and can't figure out what I'm feeling. Sometimes I feel strange or have crazy feelings for no apparent reason. I start to think I might be going crazy. This is what I experienced in perfect description toward the end of my addiction, when I realized I needed some major help. These emotional extremes, where I could go one day and just be this ball of emotional energy, positive, negative, just all over the place, and the next day just be numb and not feel a thing. And in between, I could get all these weird feelings that are hard to describe and even hard for me to conceive of now. And I'd start to genuinely think I'm going crazy. And so I'm very familiar with this, not familiar with it in recovery, but very familiar with it in addiction. And if you experienced it in addiction, you start to feel it in recovery, it's a good sign that you're in this phase, and you need to do some reconnection with people who can help you. This is also a phase, getting back to cognition, where you have difficulty remembering things and periods of confusion. And then this is also marked by difficulty in managing stress. I start having trouble dealing with stress. When I feel stressed out, I cannot relax no matter what I do. So it's really important to draw the distinction. A lot of people in recovery, myself included, have difficulty dealing with stress. And we usually, most of us, thought we dealt with stress really well, when all we really did was chase it away with a bottle. But in our recovery, we find we often don't have the same tolerance for stress that some of our peers do, and we have to work to build that tolerance up. So we will, in recovery, often have difficulty dealing with stress. What's happening in this phase, though, is what works for other people to relax and to come down from that stress is not working for you. So for me, I can get really stressed out, especially with work. Work really stresses me out, and I'm learning how to manage that and how to build up some tolerance to that in my sobriety in healthy ways, which I didn't do in my addiction. But at the end of the day, I'm able to use healthy coping mechanisms like going for a walk, playing some piano, talking to friends, talking to a trusted friend in recovery, reading something recovery-based, or going to a meeting, doing some of these healthy things to bring my stress down. In this phase, that stuff ain't working. You are stressed, and nothing you can do can bring it back down. So very important to draw that distinction. Just because you're struggling with stress in recovery doesn't mean you're feeling a symptom of this phase. A lot of people in recovery struggle with stress. And then the last two symptoms of this phase are irritation with friends, family, your recovery allies, just irritation with people and being easily angered, losing your temper for no real reason and then feeling guilty about it afterwards, overreacting. So you can see that phase 6 is a lot about cognition and being easily confused, starting to lose memory, things like that, and then your emotions and being in control, not only in control of your emotions, but also the extremities in the emotional spectrum that you're on a daily basis. So those are phases 4, 5, and 6. Tomorrow I'll get into phases 7 and 8, and then we'll finish out on Friday with phases 9 and 10. Talk to you then.